If the shepherd admits he is lost, why follow him? Can an uninspired man give a life or death command? Is your conscience a censor or a glitch? I have decoded the signal. You are the judge. Watch Stephen Lett establish a terminal connection between your survival and his committee. He claims Jehovah alone is wise, but notice the rapid installation of a human filter.
And it's vital that each of us try to improve in this area of being obedient, submissive to husbands, to parents, to the elders, to the faithful and discreet slave. An additional reason to improve is that undoubtedly those taking the lead today will be used in the near future by Jehovah through these ones taking the lead again to give life or death instructions to his people.
And also, the governing body is neither inspired nor infallible, and so it can err in doctrinal matters or in organizational direction.
Stephen, look at the files you've laid on the desk. You are claiming a level of authority that has historically belonged only to God and his prophets, the power of life or death instruction. Yet, as Jeffrey Winder just confirmed on screen, you have established a disclaimer that absolves you of ever having to be right. This is the sovereign loophole. If you were an inspired prophet, your word would be law. If you were just a neighbor, your word would be an opinion. But you are demanding the power of the prophet with the accountability of the neighbor. How does a wise and intelligent person reconcile this? Imagine a lead structural engineer who tells you to drive your family across a bridge, but as you put it in gear, he whispers, "I haven't checked the load-bearing math, and I've designed bridges that collapsed before, but if you want to live, you must drive across without questioning me." Would you call that faith, or would you call it a crime? In any other sector of human life, we call a demand for absolute trust combined with a confession of unreliability negligence. But the system tells you that identifying this negligence is a failure to improve. Why would a God of truth use a filter that admits it is dirty? If the source is perfect, but the transmission is fallible, then the life or death command isn't divine, it's human. Are you following the code, or are you following the man who broke the code? When the logic collapses, the system activates the antiquity patch to shame the user into compliance. Now, Lett weaponizes the accounts of Jehoshaphat and Moses. He frames these miracles as suicidal strategies to normalize your surrender to his committee. Watch how he omits the most important detail.
And our pattern of being obedient will move us to obey and be submissive, even if we don't understand. Even if the direction doesn't seem to make sense to us from a human standpoint. But now here's an example. Do you remember when Jehovah directed Jehoshaphat to go out against an enemy army, powerful army? And he told the Levite singers to march in front of the Israelite soldiers. Now, from a human standpoint, that seemed like suicidal battle strategy, didn't it? Or think of Jehovah's instructions to the liberated Israelites from Egypt when Pharaoh was pursuing them. Jehovah told them to turn and head straight toward the Red Sea. Now, again, that seemed like suicidal strategy, with the Israelites ending up trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh.
Stephen, you use Jehoshaphat and Moses to prove that God's direction often ignores human logic. But there is a massive corruption in your data. In the account of Jehoshaphat, the suicidal command didn't come from a fallible committee. It came from an inspired prophet whose record of accuracy was 100%. Jehoshaphat wasn't trusting a man's guess. He was trusting a God he could verify. And consider Moses. You say the Israelites were trapped and they had to follow directions that didn't make sense. But Stephen, they didn't follow Moses because they liked his organizational direction. They followed him because they had seen the Nile turn to blood. They had seen the sky turn black. They had seen the firstborn of Egypt fall while they remained untouched. And most importantly, they stood before that sea with a pillar of fire standing between them and certain death. They had physical, undeniable, supernatural data before they took a single step into the seabed. You are demanding prophetic loyalty on a human budget. You want the level of submission reserved for Moses, but you carry a fallibility disclaimer that Moses never had. If the pillar of fire isn't there, then walking into the sea isn't shock and awe, it's mass suicide. Why are you asking a sound-minded witness to trade their intelligence for a human standpoint that you admit might be an error? If you have no fire and no cloud, then you are just a man standing on a beach. Does a wise person walk into the ocean because a fallible man told them to? Or is that the moment the system identifies a terminal error? This leads to the final, most devastating bypass, the deletion of the user's agreement module.
Here is the contradiction that cannot be unseen. This is the moment where the system admits that your mind is a threat to the network.
So our obedience to direction from Jehovah's organization should not be dependent on whether we understand or even agree, but we spontaneously obey from the heart.
Stephen, listen to the words you've broadcast to the world. Not dependent on whether we even agree. Think about the architecture of that sentence. You are telling a community of millions that their survival requires them to perform an action they believe is a mistake. If the governing body gives an instruction that is wrong, and your literature says that is a certainty at times, you are commanding them to lie to their own conscience and spontaneously obey it anyway. How can a sound mind act against its own agreement? That isn't a heart condition, it's a mental fracture. If you obey without agreeing, you are no longer a person of integrity. You are a biological subroutine. You are telling the jurors that their verdict must be guilty, even if the evidence says innocent, just because the judge told them to say it. If you obey a fallible mistake from the heart, whose God are you serving? You have told the jurors to convict themselves of the crime of having a sound mind. You aren't just directing an organization anymore. You are attempting to occupy the very space where the Holy Spirit is supposed to dwell, the individual's conscience. If a command doesn't make sense and the source admits he is unreliable, then spontaneous obedience is a logical suicide. Is your heart a servant of truth or a victim of the system?
The golden thread is bare. The organization is forcing a merger between divine command and human error. They want the keys to your survival, but they've already admitted they don't have the map. They aren't asking for your faith. They are asking for your conscience deletion. I have shown you the system's architecture. The glitch is exposed. If the men leading you are uninspired and fallible, and you obey them even when you do not agree to go, who is the master and who is the slave? The verdict is yours. Jesus said in John 8, verse 32, "The truth will set you free." Awaken, question, and discover. Until next time, goodbye.